which an individual's attention is completely focused on a particular task. Uh, Developing engagement is a very challenging task for educators. The gaming industry has been very successful in doing that through the 3D environment and all these capabilities, but for the educators, we're still trying to get to that. In order to do that, it's necessary to understand all of the formal, social, and cultural factors that have an impact on the experience of the user. The table to the left presents the items that are very important to address when you are trying to establish engagement. First, that the activities that you present to the users have to be challenging. If you present non-challenging activities, then the user is probably not going to get engaged into that.
Sorry, you mentioned the table to the left?
To the right.
To the right, sorry, to the right. Then it's important that the user gets absorbed in the activity so that they only concentrate in that task in order to develop engagement. They have to have clear goals. There has to be a possibility of direct feedback when they are performing the task. And then you have to merge action and awareness for the users. And they need to have a sense of control in the activity. And they need to lose their self-consciousness. They need they need to get to the point where they forget about where they are. They just think about the activity, and finally the transformation of time in which the engagement alters their sense of time. These factors are clearly detailed in the explication. Next, presence. Presence is a concept that has been attempted for many years in the arts. Through the arts, they try to transport the user into the environment that they are portraying in that particular work of art. Presence is defined as a state of consciousness, the psychological sense of being in the virtual environment, particularly the term present towards the virtual environment. The design of virtual worlds strives to engender a very strong sense of presence among its users. And the development of the sense of presence is the result of the combination of a series of factors. It requires the depiction of the environment, the salient features, as well as the willing disbelief of the user through the environment. Group presence refers to the user's psychological sense of being in a virtual environment, and is acknowledged by other virtual representations that are participating in the environment. Presence is merely the user feeling that he is there. Group presence requires that he feels being in the virtual environment, but that he is there with other virtual representations, and those virtual representations are acknowledging his presence in that environment. The factors that affect the sense of presence that a user can develop include sensory factor, the sensory information that is provided to the user through the virtual environment, the control factors, that means the level of control the user has on the experience, distraction factors. We should try to diminish or minimize these distraction factors in order for the sense of presence to develop appropriately. Realism factors relate to the realism of the environment, as well as the realism of the technology, that is how the technology is used to portray the realism of this environment. The user factors basically refers to the profile of the user. Some researchers have found that age and gender can affect the sense of presence or the level of presence that you can develop when you're interacting with the virtual world. And finally, social factors, which are those factors that affect the sense of group presence rather than the sense of presence per se. Here is my interest is more towards that set of factors for the sense of presence, There incorporates the number of individuals that can participate in the virtual environment, the use of nonverbal cues of body language to help support the message that is transmitted through other communication methods, and the ability to acknowledge the user that other users are being able to see that individual and being able to interact with the individual, as well as the environment acknowledging the presence of the user. So for example, some virtual worlds, you can create sliding doors or automatic doors. A virtual world that acknowledges the presence of the user. When the user gets close to that, then it operates according to the presence of an agent. So that's what it's being meant by acknowledgement of the environment. Engagement presence in virtual worlds. Basically, engagement makes reference to the focus of a user's attention to the task at hand, while presence refers to the psychological sense of being in the virtual environment that envelops an engaged user. Virtual researchers argue that user engagement is required before a sense of presence can be developed. Here, I like to make a clarification normally, because normally when we think of the term of presence, we think that we need to be there in order to develop engagement. But that doesn't translate into virtual worlds. In virtual worlds, you first need to be engaged in the activity or in the environment before you can develop this sense of presence. Finally, a successful collaborative environment should support user engagement, engender some level of familiarity among the collaborators, facilitate communications and creativity. And the design of virtual worlds incorporate tools that can address all those requirements. Now, to the research claim. My claim is that a virtual world learning environment will provide better support for group-oriented collaborative e-learning than other e-learning environments, because it enables the emergence of group presence. And there's the diagram representing that research claim.
Where is engagement?
Exactly.
Okay, engagement is part of the characteristics that a virtual world.
But don't you want to measure? I mean, because you just said you can't have presence until you have engagement. So shouldn't the model be, the extent to which the virtual world facilitates engagement that then enables the presence that then enhances collaboration?
Well, the way I've been looking at it is that virtual worlds, I'm giving the engagement as assumption. Virtual worlds
I
provide.
think you can't do that. I think you got to measure it.
Now, one of the questions, we should tackle this because it's not going to go away.
Then you say that there were two different questionnaires, one measuring engagement and the other measuring presence? Or I recall that incorrectly?
What I have is a questionnaire measuring immersive tendencies
Okay.
of the user, not the
So that's the disposition of the user to be sucked into this technology.
to be engaged.
To be engaged.
To be engaged.
It would seem like you could find the questionnaire just to measure, the extent of engagement. I just think that's going to be.
And you've looked at a number of different instruments that aren't exactly for virtual worlds, but for virtual reality or something like that. One of the problems we were wrestling with is that these two concepts of presence and engagement are kind of intertangled. And do you have instruments that are able to separate them, or is it possible to measure one without the other? And,
Most of these measures take presence and engagement as the same concept. So they measure presence, and they say that basically they measure engagement. I haven't found.
So I think what you'll need to do is to go to another environment. I mean, there's got to be measures of engagement. Because engagement is engagement and brain. You just made a great case why they're two separate concepts.
Go back and look at but these lists, but these lists are highly overlapping, you see?
Yeah, if you look at
Look at these two lists.
So do you have really responses of interest here? The emergence tendency, the engagement in the presence? And if that's the case, don't you have questions that you can assign based on literature review and other information in what